Okay, so this week I'm going to be playing Punishing Maverick, a deck that it seemed like a very, very light amount of buzz in light of the new metagame shifts, but I think it's actually pretty well positioned. I really like the Death and Taxes style decks right now. I think they are very good at battling through a large number of things, and very specifically, I like this deck against Blue Red Delver. I think that normal Death and Taxes is vulnerable to Forked Bolt and Sulfur Elemental, even though you have things like, oh, I can get them with Spirit of the Labyrinth on their Treasure Cruise. I think that opening yourself up to the red half of their deck is really bad. And normal Maverick is better, but I think that the Punishing deck really kind of takes it to the next level against Delver. It's not just that the card Punishing Fire is good against their threats, it's that the main way that your deck that is, land an unkillable threat after kind of interacting with them is going to lose is if they have a creature in play that you can't actually interact with in combat. So like a Young Pyromancer that makes 7 tokens, or a Delver Secrets that's flying overhead. And this deck has 7 ways to kill those creatures and force the games into an interactive state. I also think that this deck is pretty well tuned for the Wasteland Light metagame that the Blue Red Delver deck has kind of built towards, which is nice to say the least. Looking at the specific choices, this list is a little preliminary. My tutor box for lands is pretty light. There's just Wastelands and Caracas, Horizon Canopy. Nothing too crazy to get with Night because I think there's going to be a lot of attacking with it. No man lands. No Maze of it. I'm not a huge fan of that in a world of Young Pyromancer, even if it does handle Delver. There's only 3 Groves, which is really just kind of a numbers issue. It's very possible that the Force Savannah should be another Grove, but at the same time, I don't know if the mana works for that. And I don't know if the mana works to cut a Taiga if you ever get Wastelanded. The actual mana slot I'm the most questioning is this Birds of Paradise, because I'm kind of struggling to think about when I'd actually want it over more Noble Hierarchs. But at the same time, I think the cost is just so low, and the ability for it to add red is reasonably good. Looking at the other cards, for Green Sun Zenith, again, our toolbox is pretty tight. Multiple Pride Mages is just kind of a concession to the fact that we need to be able to beat the mirror. Teague is pretty obvious. Scrib Ranger is not as good as it once was, but at the same time, it does all the things that you've always wanted it to do. It can hold off a Vegeta with Dryad Arbor like Quirion Ranger does in Elves. It blocks Delver as a protection from blue creature. It untaps Knights. It untaps Mother Runes. Nothing too complicated. Again, Stoneforge Mystic is skimped on in this deck. There's just so many toolboxes that you try to fit into these Maverick decks that you can't really afford the 4 Mystics and potentially a sword that Death and Taxes does. And that's, definitely a drawback to the deck, as is the kind of combo of Thalia and Green Sun Zenith. But then again, by playing Zenith, you are no longer playing Aether Vial, and you can't ever have the awful issue of, I drew 2 Aether Vials and they aren't creatures, and this is horrible. Looking at the board, we have 4 main categories of cards. We have crazy additional threats to kind of trump decks that we need trumps against. We have generic hate cards that kind of swap around and do whatever they're going to do. It's pretty straightforward as to what you want Thalia, Teague, Ooze, and Pajuka Bog against. Unfortunately, I think Commander is released right now, but I could actually not find a single copy of Containment Priest to put in the deck, because I think it may have been released like a day ago or something online. So there should be some number of that card in the sideboard, probably over the Thalia, and I'm not sure what else. But you do really want that effect because Elves is definitely an issue for your list, even if you have Punishing Fire. I definitely debated a Fiery Justice, and actually, I'm probably just going to add that right now that I'm talking about it, because that card just seems so good. Just maybe not. No, Fiery Justice is excellent. And a card that I think people will kind of forget about and should not be missed. It kills all of the elf cards. It kills it like their entire board. It's basically, similar to Zealous Persecution there. Probably better because you can take down Death Rites and stuff with it too. It can actually KO a Young Pyromancer and tokens if they create a board with it. So it's likely that one of these One drop interactive spells that kind of tune your deck is going to become that. Probably not the pass, because those are really important in mirrors and stuff. Probably not the red blast. Actually, maybe neither of those. We'll see. These are, like I said, you know, you kind of make your deck a little more interactive post board as you should be doing. And then you have these kind of fair deck. They're not threats, but they're trumps. Uh, Armageddon here because Cataclysm is much better in the Death and Taxes deck because keeping an artifact matters a lot more because if you blow up all the lands but one, you can keep an Aether Vial and actually put things into play. Um, you also just have more Stoneforge Mystics and more artifacts, as I pointed out before. So keeping the artifact again is more important. Whereas here, double white is harder to get, not by a lot, but a little bit. And you just want to kill all the lands and keep your Noble Hierarch, which is the actual bigger advantage than blowing up or all but one of everything. Loam is there's just like same thing with Delver decks. There's just these weird mid-range mirrors where they have like a little more mana to do stuff with, but they aren't necessarily on another level in terms of trump cards. Where Loam getting back Wastelands or Horizon Canopies is really good, and Library is a slightly bigger card advantage engine, but for like a similar kind of matchup where there may be like actually a level ahead of you, like Jund, but you can just draw some cards and actually remain in the game. We'll see how this deck goes. I'm expecting to make a lot of changes. Like I said, I'm already going to add a Fiery Justice, so I think it has a lot of promise in the metagame right now, and I would not count this out.